What happens when the most powerful wolf in existence asks a question no one dares to answer? When silence becomes confession and protection feels like a death sentence. This is the story of Leora, a woman who survived by staying invisible until the Alpha King made her impossible to ignore. Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome to your new obsession. I'm so glad you're here. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Are you team night owl or early bird? And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, do me a favor and hit that button right now. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this story ends. Now let's dive in, because this one's going to wreck you in the best way. Leora could taste blood. Not her own, not this time, but the memory of it. Copper and shame, swallowed down so many times it had become a flavor she associated with survival. She stood at the very edge of the great stone hall, where torchlight barely reached, where shadows gathered like old friends. Her fingers were laced tightly together in front of her, knuckles white, nails digging into her palms just enough to keep her grounded. Don't flinch. Don't speak. Don't give them a reason. The Moon Council gathering was in full ceremonial swing. Every alpha from every pack in the Northern Territory had come to the capital, to the Hall of Iron and Ash, to renew their oaths of loyalty. The air was thick with dominance, testosterone, and barely concealed ambition. Wolves didn't kneel easily, but they knelt here before the throne that had been empty for the last 10 minutes. Waiting. Leora had been to 3 of these gatherings in her 24 years. Each one the same. Each one worse. She was always brought along, always positioned near the back with the healers and the Omegas, always told to lower her eyes and keep her mouth shut. She was useful, they said. Her hands could mend broken bones, close wounds that should have killed. But useful wasn't the same as valued. Useful things got used up. She felt the stares even now, quick, dismissive glances from wolves who outranked her by blood and cruelty. They didn't see her as a threat. How could they? She had no pack mark, no family name that mattered, no wolf strong enough to defend her. Leora was a shadow in a room full of predators, and shadows didn't survive by being seen. The iron doors at the far end of the hall suddenly groaned open. Every wolf in the room stiffened. The scent hit first, pine and smoke, cold wind and something ancient, something that made every instinct in Leora's body scream run and submit at the same time. Her wolf, dormant and quiet for so long, stirred for the first time in months. A whimper rolled through her mind, low and uncertain. He's here. Alpha King Ronan Blackthorn entered like a storm given flesh. He was taller than she remembered, broad-shouldered and lean-muscled, moving with a predator's efficiency. His black coat swept behind him, unbuttoned, revealing a simple dark shirt beneath that did nothing to hide the power coiled in every line of his body. His hair was dark, almost black, cut short on the sides, but longer on top, falling just slightly across his forehead. But it was his eyes that made breathing difficult. Silver. Cold. Unreadable. Eyes that had seen too much and forgiven nothing. The alphas in the front row bowed immediately, dropping to one knee in perfect unison. It rippled backward through the hall row after row, until the only ones still standing were the Omegas, the healers, and Leora. She should bow. She knew that. But her body had locked up, frozen in some primal response she didn't understand. Her wolf was pushing forward now, clawing at the edges of her consciousness, desperate and confused. What is happening? Ronan's gaze swept the room with the efficiency of a man who had done this 1,000 times. He didn't smile. Didn't speak. He walked toward the throne at the head of the hall, his boots echoing on stone, and every wolf in the room held their breath. But then, he stopped. Mid-step. Mid-stride. His head turned, just slightly, and those silver eyes locked onto something at the back of the room. Onto her. Leora's heart slammed into her ribs. She couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't look away. For a moment, the Alpha King just stared at her. His expression didn't change, no surprise, no curiosity, but something flickered in his eyes. Something dangerous. His nostrils flared, just once, and his jaw tightened. Then he turned back and continued walking as if nothing had happened. But Leora knew better. He saw me. The ceremony began. Oaths were sworn. Alphas rose one by one to reaffirm their loyalty, their voices strong and steady, their wolves pressing dominance into the air like a contest none of them could win. Ronan sat on the throne, still and silent, his presence a weight that pressed down on the entire hall. Leora tried to focus on breathing, tried to disappear again. But her wolf wouldn't settle, and her pulse wouldn't slow, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something irreversible. It was Alpha Cade from the Rivenwood pack who called her forward. "Healer," he said, his voice cutting through the low murmur of conversation. "Come here." Leora's stomach dropped. She glanced up, saw him gesturing impatiently, his expression bored. He was standing near the front with two other alphas, Dane of Ashford and Ethan of the Pale Crust. All three watched her with the same lazy arrogance. She moved before she could think, stepping out of the shadows and into the candlelight. Her footsteps sounded too loud. Her hands trembled, so she clasped them behind her back. When she reached them, Cade held out his arm without looking at her. "Sparring accident," he said flatly. "Fix it." There was no sparring accident. The wound on his forearm was shallow, deliberate, something he could have healed on his own in an hour. This wasn't about healing. This was about reminding her where she stood. Leora knelt without a word and reached for his arm. Her fingers brushed his skin, and she felt the familiar pull of her gift rising to the surface, warmth, light, the soft hum of energy that had always come so naturally. The wound closed in seconds, smooth and clean, as if it had never existed. Cade pulled his arm back and turned away, dismissing her like furniture. She started to rise. "Stay." The voice was low, quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The entire hall fell silent. Leora froze, still kneeling, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Slowly, she lifted her head. Ronan Blackthorn was standing now. He had risen from the throne without a sound, and he was walking toward her. No, not toward her. Toward them. The three alphas shifted, uneasy but trying not to show it. Cade straightened his shoulders. Dane's hand twitched toward his side. Ethan didn't move at all, but his sense soured with tension. Ronan stopped 3 feet away. He didn't look at them. He looked at Leora. And then, in front of every alpha, every beta, every wolf who had ever hurt her or ignored her or made her believe she was nothing, the Alpha King asked a question. "Who hurt you?" His voice was soft, controlled. But there was something underneath it, something volcanic and barely restrained, and Leora realized with cold, creeping horror that he wasn't asking because he didn't know. He was asking because he wanted them to know he knew. The hall held its breath. Leora opened her mouth. But no sound came out, because the ones who hurt her were standing right beside him. And if she answered, if she told the truth, she wouldn't be the only one who fell. Okay, loves, pause right there. What do you think Leora should do? Should she speak, or should she stay silent? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I'm dying to know what you would do in her position. And if you're already hooked, good. Hit that subscribe button, because this is only the beginning. Leora had learned a long time ago that silence was a language all its own. It could mean obedience, fear, loyalty, sometimes all three at once. But in this moment, kneeling on cold stone, caught in the silver gaze of the most dangerous wolf alive, silence meant something else entirely. It meant survival. She dropped her eyes to the floor and forced her voice to come out steady. No one, Alpha King. The lie tasted like ash. Ronan didn't move, didn't blink. His gaze stayed locked on her for 3 more seconds, long enough that she felt it like a hand around her throat, and then he turned his attention to the 3 alphas standing behind her. Is that true? His voice was still soft, still controlled, still absolutely terrifying. Cade recovered first, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Of course, Your Majesty. Leora is valued in our packs. We keep our healers safe. Valued, Ronan repeated, as if tasting the word. His gaze flicked back to Leora, still kneeling. Then why is she on her knees? The question landed like a blade. Cade's smile faltered. Dane shifted his weight. Ethan remained perfectly still, but his jaw tightened. Protocol, Ethan said smoothly. Healers kneel when attending to ranked wolves. It's tradition. Tradition. Ronan's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Stand up. It took Leora a moment to realize he was talking to her. She rose on shaking legs, keeping her gaze down, her hands clasped in front of her. She could feel every eye in the hall on her now, some curious, some hostile, some calculating. She had spent years making herself invisible, and now the Alpha King had dragged her into the light. Ronan studied her for another moment, and then turned back to the Alphas. If I hear, he said quietly, that any wolf under my rule has mistreated a healer, any healer, I will consider it an act of treason. Do you understand? Yes, Alpha King, they said in unison. But Leora heard what they didn't say. This changes nothing. Ronan turned and walked back to the throne without another word. The ceremony resumed. Leora was dismissed with a curt gesture, and she fled back to the shadows as quickly as she could, her heart still racing, her wolf still whimpering in confusion. Why did he do that? She didn't have an answer. The Moon Council gathering lasted 3 more hours. By the time it ended, Leora's legs were numb and her head was pounding. She slipped out of the hall the moment she was able, moving through the stone corridors of the capital's pack house with practiced efficiency. She knew where to walk to avoid the main routes, where to turn to stay out of sight. The healer's wing was quiet when she arrived. A few others were already there: Anna, an older wolf with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, and Maya, a beta's daughter who had chosen healing over fighting. They both looked up when Leora entered. Are you all right? Anna asked immediately, setting down the herbs she'd been sorting. Leora nodded, but didn't speak. She moved to her cot in the corner and sank onto it, pulling her knees to her chest. Maya sat down beside her, her voice low. What happened in there? Everyone's talking about it. Nothing happened, Leora said quietly. The Alpha King stopped the ceremony for you. That's not nothing. He was making a point, Leora said. That's all. Anna crossed the room and crouched in front of her, her expression serious. Leora, if someone hurt you, if one of the Alphas. They didn't. The lie came automatically. Easier this time. I'm fine. Anna didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. She just reached out and squeezed Leora's hand once before standing. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Leora nodded, but she knew she wouldn't sleep. She didn't. Hours later, long after the others had drifted off, Leora lay on her cot staring at the ceiling, her mind turning over the events of the evening like stones in her hand. Who hurt you? Why had he asked that? Why had he looked at her like he knew? Her wolf stirred again, restless and uneasy. It had been so quiet for so long, ever since the incident 3 years ago, when she'd tried to shift during a new moon and her wolf had simply not come. The healers had said it was trauma. Stress. That her wolf was protecting her by retreating. But tonight, her wolf had woken up. And it was afraid. A soft knock on the door jolted her upright. Anna and Maya didn't stir. They were heavy sleepers, worn out from the day's work. Leora slipped off her cot and padded silently to the door, cracking it open just enough to see who was there. A man stood in the hallway, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark blonde hair and sharp green eyes. He wore the black and silver uniform of the Alpha King's personal guard, and his expression was unreadable. Leora, he asked quietly. She nodded, her throat tight. The Alpha King requests your presence. Her heart stopped. Now, she whispered. Now. She followed him through the pack house in silence, her bare feet soundless on the stone floors. The guard didn't speak, didn't look back, just led her through corridor after corridor until they reached a part of the building she'd never been to before. The Alpha King's Wing. The guard stopped in front of a heavy oak door and knocked twice. "Enter," came the voice from inside. The guard opened the door, gestured for Leora to go in, and then closed it behind her. She stood frozen just inside the doorway. The room was large but simply furnished, a desk covered in maps and reports, a low couch near the fireplace, shelves lined with books. And standing by the window, silhouetted against the moonlight, was Ronan Blackthorn. He didn't turn around. "Sit," he said. Leora's legs moved on instinct, carrying her to the couch. She sat on the very edge, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Ronan was silent for a long moment, and then he turned to face her. In the firelight, he looked different. Less like a king and more like a man, tired, worn, carrying a weight she couldn't begin to understand. His silver eyes studied her, but there was no coldness in them now. Just curiosity. And something else she couldn't name. "You lied to me," he said quietly. Leora's breath caught. She didn't deny it. Ronan crossed the room and sat down in the chair across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I'm going to ask you again, and I want the truth this time. Who hurt you? Why does it matter?" The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she immediately regretted them. But Ronan didn't look angry. He just tilted his head slightly. "Because it does." "I'm no one," Leora said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just a healer." "Why would you care?" "Because," Ronan said, his gaze steady and unyielding, "you're not just a healer." Leora froze. "You don't know, do you?" he continued, his voice soft, almost gentle. "You don't know what you are." I don't understand." Ronan leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Your scent. It's different. Rare. I've only encountered it once before, in a very old bloodline that was supposed to be extinct." Leora's heart was pounding now, so hard it hurt. "What bloodline?" Ronan studied her for a long moment. And then he said, "The Moonbound line." The name meant nothing to her. But the way he said it, like it was something sacred and dangerous all at once, made her wolf press forward, desperate and confused. "I don't. I've never heard of that," Leora said. "I know," Ronan said quietly. "That's the problem." He stood, moving back to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Someone erased you, Leora. Took your history, your name, your power. And I need to know who." "I don't have power," she said automatically. Ronan glanced back at her, and for the first time, something almost like sympathy crossed his face. "Yes," he said softly. "You do. There it is, the foundation is set. Leora doesn't know who she really is, but Ronan does. And now? Now things are about to get very dangerous. If you're loving this so far, drop a comment and tell me, do you trust Ronan? Or is he hiding something too?" Leora stared at the Alpha King like he'd just told her the moon was falling. "That's impossible," she said, her voice thin. "I can't even shift properly. My wolf barely responds." "I'm restrained," Ronan interrupted, turning fully to face her. "Not broken. Restrained." The word hit her like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" Ronan moved back toward her, but this time he didn't sit. He stood close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, and the proximity made her pulse stutter. "There are ways to suppress a wolf," he said quietly. "Herbs. Rituals. Blood magic, if someone is desperate enough. The symptoms are always the same. The wolf retreats, becomes dormant, stops responding to the shift. The host feels weak. Powerless." His gaze sharpened. "Disposable." Leora's breath came faster. "Why would anyone do that to me?" "Because," Ronan said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, "if you knew what you were, you'd be a threat." Before she could respond, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather journal, worn and old. He flipped it open to a page marked with a strip of black ribbon and held it out to her. Leora took it with trembling hands. The page was filled with elegant, handwritten script, names, dates, bloodlines traced back centuries. And there, near the bottom, circled in faded ink, Moonbound line, last known heir, Mariella Ashenvale, died January 4, 2001. No surviving children. Leora's vision blurred. She blinked hard, forcing herself to focus. Ashenvale, she whispered. That's not. I don't have a family name. You did. Ronan's voice was quiet but firm. It was taken from you. How do you know this? Her hands were shaking now, the journal trembling in her grip. How do you know any of this? Ronan crouched down in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level. The gesture was so unexpected, so human, that it startled her into silence. Because, he said, his silver eyes locked on hers, I've been looking for you for 3 years. The room tilted. What? 3 years ago, Ronan continued, his voice steady, I started noticing inconsistencies in pack records. Healers who disappeared. Bloodlines that ended too abruptly. And then I found this journal in the old council archives, hidden, almost destroyed. It listed every Moonbound heir going back 400 years. All of them dead. All of them convenient. Leora's throat was so tight she could barely breathe. Why does it matter? What is the Moonbound line? Ronan's expression darkened. Balance, he said simply. The Alpha King holds absolute power over the packs, but the Moonbound line was created to be the counterweight. A bloodline tied to the moon itself, capable of challenging or supporting the king's authority. Together, they were supposed to maintain peace. Apart, he trailed off, his jaw tightening. Apart, the system falls into tyranny. Or chaos. And you think I'm me? I don't think, Ronan said quietly. I know. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took her wrist. His thumb pressed against her pulse point, and Leora gasped as warmth flooded through her, bright and electric and alive, waking parts of her she thought had died years ago. Her wolf surged forward with a howl. And for the first time in 3 years, Leora felt whole. Ronan released her wrist and stood, his expression unreadable. That's the bond, he said quietly. The Moonbound and the Alpha King are connected. It's not a choice. It's written into your blood. Into mine. Leora stared at him, her mind racing. You're saying we're mates? Fated, Ronan corrected. By design. By magic. By something older than either of us. She should have felt trapped. Terrified. But all she felt was a strange, aching relief, like a question she hadn't known how to ask had finally been answered. Why didn't you tell me before? She whispered. In the hall. In front of everyone. Because, Ronan said, his voice turning cold, the people who hurt you are the same ones who erased your bloodline. And if they know I've found you, if they know you're alive and awakening, they'll kill you before you ever have the chance to remember what you are. A chill ran down her spine. Then why ask that question? Her voice rose slightly, frustration breaking through the shock. Why put a target on my back? Ronan's smile was sharp and humorless. Because I wanted to see who flinched. Leora left the Alpha King's chambers an hour later, her mind spinning, her heart still racing. Ronan had given her the journal to keep, told her to trust no one, and assigned one of his personal guards, a stern-faced woman named Kara, to shadow her movements. She'll keep her distance, Ronan had said. But if anyone tries to harm you, she has orders to kill first and ask questions later. Leora wasn't sure if that made her feel safer or more afraid. By the time she returned to the healer's wing, dawn was breaking. Anna and Maya were already awake, preparing supplies for the day. They looked up when she entered, their expressions tight with worry. Where were you? Maya asked immediately. Leora hesitated, Ronan's warning echoing in her mind. Trust no one. I was summoned. The Alpha King wanted to ask me some questions about healing practices. It wasn't a complete lie. Anna frowned. At midnight. He works late, Leora said, trying to sound casual. She moved to her cot and tucked the journal under her pillow, her back to them. It wasn't a big deal. The silence behind her was heavy. Leora, Anna said slowly. Be careful. I am. No, Anna said, her voice dropping. I mean it. The Alpha King, he's not like the others. He doesn't forgive. He doesn't forget. If you get caught up in something. I won't, Leora said firmly, turning to face her. I promise. Anna held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded and went back to her work. But Leora saw the doubt in her eyes. The second day of the Moon Council gathering was less formal than the first, meetings between alphas, negotiations, alliances being forged and broken over meals, and sparring matches. Leora was assigned to the healing tent outside, where minor injuries were treated and exhaustion managed. It should have been routine. It wasn't. Every time she looked up, she saw wolves watching her. Some were curious. Some were hostile. And some, like Alpha Cade, who appeared at the tent entrance just before noon, looked at her like she was a problem that needed to be solved. Leora, he said, his tone falsely pleasant. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. She glanced toward Kara, who stood 50 feet away, partially hidden behind a stone pillar. The guard's hand rested casually on the hilt of her blade. Leora set down the bandages she'd been rolling and followed Cade out of the tent. He led her toward the training grounds, a wide, open field where wolves sparred and ran drills. Far enough from the main pack house that no one would overhear. Far enough to be dangerous. Cade stopped and turned to face her, his smile gone. What did you tell him? He asked quietly. Leora's heart lurched. I don't know what you. Don't, Cade snapped, stepping closer. Don't lie to me. The Alpha King doesn't summon lowborn healers in the middle of the night for questions. So I'll ask you again. What did you tell him? Nothing, Leora said, forcing her voice to stay steady. He asked if anyone had hurt me. I said no. And that was it. Cade studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowed. Then he laughed, short and sharp. You think you're clever, don't you? Caught his attention. Made yourself seem interesting. I didn't. You need to understand something, Cade said, his voice turning soft and deadly. You are ours. You belong to the Northern Packs. We found you. We trained you. We kept you alive when no one else wanted you. And if you think the Alpha King is going to protect you, you're wrong. Leora's wolf snarled, pushing forward. He already is, she said before she could stop herself. Cade's expression darkened. What did you just say? Footsteps crunched on gravel behind them. She said, came a low, cold voice, that I'm protecting her. Cade spun around. Ronan stood 10 feet away, his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed. But there was nothing relaxed about the way he looked at Cade, like a predator deciding whether to kill quickly or slowly. Alpha King, Cade said, recovering quickly. He dipped his head in a shallow bow. I was just threatening her, Ronan finished. I heard. Cade's jaw tightened. With respect, Your Majesty, this is a pack matter. Leora is mine. The word cut through the air like a blade. Cade froze. Ronan stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and Leora felt the shift in the air, the weight of his dominance pressing down like a physical force. Let me make this very simple, Ronan said quietly. Leora is under my protection. That means she is untouchable. If you speak to her, you ask my permission first. If you look at her, you remember who she belongs to. And if you ever threaten her again, his smile was cold and sharp. I'll make sure you don't have a tongue to do it with. Cade's face went pale. Do we understand each other? Ronan asked. Yes, Alpha King. Good. Ronan stepped back. Now leave. Cade hesitated for only a moment before turning and walking away, his shoulders stiff with humiliation. Leora stood frozen, her heart hammering. Ronan turned to her, and the coldness in his expression melted away. Are you all right? She nodded mutely. Come on, he said gently. Let's get you somewhere safe. And for the first time in her life, Leora believed that maybe, just maybe, she actually could be. And there it is. The Alpha King just claimed her in front of a rival Alpha. The bond is real. The danger is real. And Leora? She's starting to realize she's not as powerless as she thought. If you're on the edge of your seat right now, drop a comment and let me know, are you Team Ronan? Ronan didn't take her back to the healer's wing. Instead, he led her through a side entrance of the pack house, up a narrow stone staircase that spiraled higher than Leora had ever been. They passed guards who straightened immediately at the sight of their king, nodding respectfully but asking no questions. They stopped at a door on the 4th floor, heavy oak, reinforced with iron. Ronan pushed it open and gestured for her to enter. The room was smaller than his chambers, but infinitely more comfortable. A large bed with thick furs, a writing desk near the window, shelves stocked with books, and a fireplace that was already lit, filling the space with warmth. This is one of the guest suites, Ronan said, closing the door behind them. It's warded. No one can enter without my permission. Leora turned to face him, her arms wrapped around herself. You can't just keep me locked up. I'm not locking you up, Ronan said calmly. I'm keeping you alive. For how long? Her voice cracked slightly. The gathering ends in 3 days. Then what? I go back to the northern packs and pretend none of this happened. Ronan's expression hardened. You're not going back. I don't have a choice. Yes, he said firmly, stepping closer. You do. You have me. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Leora's breath caught. You barely know me. I know enough. His voice softened. I know you've survived things that would have broken most wolves. I know you're stronger than you believe. And I know that whoever tried to erase you failed, because you're still here. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, and she looked away quickly, blinking them back. She wasn't used to this, someone seeing her. Actually seeing her. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Ronan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and raw. Because I know what it's like to be alone. To carry weight no one else can see. And because, he hesitated, as if the words were difficult. Because when I saw you in that hall, kneeling, trying to disappear, something in me broke. Leora looked up at him, and the vulnerability in his eyes nearly undid her. The bond, she asked softly. Maybe, Ronan admitted. But I think it's more than that. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them felt charged, electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then Ronan stepped back, breaking the spell. You should rest, he said, his voice carefully neutral again. Kara will be stationed outside your door. If you need anything. Ronan. He stopped, his hand on the doorknob. Thank you, Leora said quietly. He glanced back at her, and something flickered in his silver eyes, something warm and unguarded. Don't thank me yet, he said softly. This is just the beginning. Leora spent the rest of the day in the suite, poring over the journal Ronan had given her. The moonbound line. Her bloodline. Every page revealed something new, something impossible. The moonbound wolves were rare, born only once every few generations. They could commune with the moon itself, drawing power from its phases. At full strength, a moonbound wolf could amplify or nullify an alpha's commands, could heal entire packs, could even challenge the Alpha King's authority if he became tyrannical. They were protectors. Balancers. And they'd all been systematically eliminated. Leora traced her finger over the names of the dead, her heart aching. Mariella Ashenvale, her mother, according to the notes, had died 24 years ago. The same year Leora was born. No surviving children, the entry said. But that was a lie. She was here. A knock on the door startled her out of her thoughts. Come in, she called, quickly closing the journal. The door opened, and to her surprise, it wasn't Kara. It was a man she'd never seen before, tall and lean, with dark hair streaked with silver and eyes the color of amber. He wore the formal robes of a council elder, and his presence radiated calm authority. Leora Ashenvale, he said, his voice smooth and cultured. May I come in? She tensed immediately. How do you know that name? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Because I knew your mother. Leora's heart stopped. The man stepped inside and closed the door gently behind him. My name is Jareth. I served on the Moon Council 30 years ago, before I retired to the Eastern Territories. I heard whispers that the Alpha King had found something interesting. When I saw you in the hall yesterday, I knew. Knew what? Leora asked, standing slowly. That Mariella's daughter survived. Leora's hands clenched into fists. If you knew my mother, then you know what happened to her. You know why I was erased. Jareth's expression grew somber. I do. And I'm sorry. Your mother was a brilliant woman, strong, compassionate, and deeply committed to the balance. But there were those who feared what she represented. What you represent. The Northern Alphas, Leora said quietly. Jareth inclined his head. Among others. Then why are you here? Leora demanded. To finish what they started? No, Jareth said firmly. I'm here to help you. Why should I trust you? Because, he said, pulling a small velvet pouch from his robes, I have something that belongs to you. He opened the pouch and poured its contents into his palm. A pendant silver, shaped like a crescent moon, with a single blue stone at its center that seemed to glow with inner light. Leora's breath caught. She'd seen that pendant before. In dreams. In flashes of memory she couldn't quite grasp. This was your mother's, Jareth said gently. She wore it every day. It's a moonbound heirloom, ancient, powerful. It will help you access your gifts. He held it out to her. Leora stared at it, her heart pounding. Every instinct screamed at her not to trust him, but the pull of the pendant was undeniable. Slowly, she reached out and took it. The moment her fingers closed around the silver, warmth flooded through her, bright and fierce and right. Her wolf surged forward with a joyful howl, and for the first time in years, Leora felt her power rise to the surface, unrestrained and wild. She gasped, nearly dropping the pendant. Jareth smiled. You feel it, don't you? Your birthright. What is this? Leora whispered, staring at the pendant. Freedom, Jareth said simply. The Alphas who suppressed you used herbs and rituals to bind your wolf. But this pendant will break those bindings. Wear it, and you'll be able to shift. To fight. To choose. Leora looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Why would you give this to me? Jareth's expression softened. Because your mother saved my life once. And because the world needs a moonbound again, now more than ever. Before Leora could respond, the door burst open. Ronan stood in the doorway, his eyes blazing silver, his entire body radiating lethal fury. Step away from her, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Jareth raised his hands slowly, his expression calm. Your Majesty. I mean no harm. I said step away. Jareth obeyed, moving toward the door. But as he passed Ronan, he paused. She deserves to know the truth, Ronan. All of it. Get out, Ronan growled. Jareth left without another word. Ronan crossed the room in 3 strides and took Leora's face in his hands, his eyes scanning her frantically. Did he hurt you? Did he give you anything? Say anything. I'm fine, Leora said quickly. He gave me this. She held up the pendant. Ronan's expression turned murderous. Take it off. What? No. Leora. His voice was sharp now, commanding. Take it off. Why? She demanded, pulling back. He said it was my mother's. That it would help me. It's a tracker, Ronan said flatly. Leora froze. What? That pendant is enchanted, Ronan continued, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Anyone who's bonded to it can sense your location at all times. Jareth didn't give it to you to help you. He gave it to you so the Northern Alphas would know exactly where you are every second of every day. The warmth in Leora's chest turned to ice. No, she whispered. No, he said. He lied, Ronan said, his voice softening. I'm sorry. But he lied. Leora looked down at the pendant, her hands shaking. The betrayal cut deeper than she'd expected, because for one brief, shining moment, she'd believed someone actually cared. Here, Ronan said gently. He pulled a knife from his belt and carefully cut the chain, letting the pendant fall into his palm. I'll have it destroyed. Wait. Leora caught his wrist. What if we don't? Ronan frowned. What do you mean? A plan was forming in her mind, reckless, dangerous, but maybe just crazy enough to work. You said you wanted to see who would flinch, Leora said slowly. What if we give them something to flinch at? Ronan studied her for a long moment, and then a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. Tell me what you're thinking, he said. 2 hours later, Leora stood in the center of the great hall once again, but this time, she wasn't hiding. She wore a dress Ronan had provided, simple but elegant, deep blue like midnight, with the pendant hanging openly around her neck. Her hair was unbound, falling in dark waves down her back, and for the first time in years, she stood tall. The Alphas had been summoned for an emergency council session. They filed in slowly, confusion and irritation written on their faces. When they saw Leora standing beside the Alpha King, that confusion turned to alarm. Ronan waited until everyone was assembled. Then he spoke. 3 days ago, he said, his voice carrying easily through the hall, I asked a question. No one answered. His gaze swept the room. So I'll ask it again. Who hurt Leora Ashenvale? Gasps echoed through the hall. Cade stood frozen, his face pale. Dane exchanged a quick glance with Ethan. Jareth, standing in the back, smiled faintly. The last surviving heir of the Moonbound line, Ronan continued, his voice hard as iron. Erased. Suppressed. Abused. And you all knew. That's absurd, Cade started. Sit down, Ronan said quietly. Cade sat. Ronan turned to Leora and held out his hand. She took it. And together, they faced the wolves who had tried to destroy her. The silence in the hall was suffocating. Every alpha, every beta, every ranked wolf stared at Leora like she was a ghost risen from the grave. And in a way, she was a bloodline they'd thought buried, a threat they'd believed neutralized. Now standing beside the Alpha King, wearing her mother's pendant. Alive. Ronan's hand was warm around hers, grounding her, giving her strength she didn't know she possessed. She could feel the bond between them humming like a live wire, power flowing back and forth, amplifying, balancing. For those of you who don't know your history, Ronan said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade, the Moonbound line was created 4 centuries ago to serve as a check on absolute power. Where the Alpha King commands, the Moonbound can choose to amplify or nullify. He paused, letting that sink in. It's a partnership. A balance. And without it, this system becomes exactly what we fought so hard to prevent, tyranny. With respect, Your Majesty, Alpha Dane said carefully, standing from his seat, the Moonbound line died out generations ago. There's no proof that this girl is. I have proof, Ronan interrupted. He gestured to a guard at the door, who brought forward a leather case. Ronan opened it and pulled out several documents, birth records, bloodline charts, DNA analyses. Leora's blood was tested 2 days ago. The markers are unmistakable. She is Mariella Ashenvale's daughter, the last Moonbound heir. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. But she has no wolf, Ethan said, his voice smooth but his eyes calculating. We've all seen her. She can't shift. She has no dominance. How can she possibly be? Because someone made sure of it, Ronan said coldly. His gaze swept across the northern alphas. Someone fed her suppression herbs for years. Someone manipulated records to erase her lineage. Someone made certain she would never know what she was. He stepped forward, his presence expanding, pressing down on every wolf in the room. And I intend to find out who. Cade shot to his feet. You're accusing us? Based on what suspicion? Paranoia. Based on evidence, Ronan said quietly. He nodded to another guard who wheeled in a small cart covered with glass vials. These were found in the storage rooms of 3 northern pack houses: Rivenwood, Ashford, and Pale Crust. Wolfsbane extract. Silver dust. Moonflower root. His voice dropped to something deadly. All of them ingredients used to suppress a wolf's nature. To bind their power. The color drained from Cade's face. That proves nothing, Dane said quickly. Those are common healing supplies. In these concentrations? Ronan's smile was razor-sharp. A healer would recognize these dosages as toxic. But Leora was given them regularly, disguised as supplements to strengthen her gifts. He turned to Leora. Isn't that right? Leora's throat was tight, but she forced herself to speak. Every week, she said, her voice quiet but steady. Alpha Cade's healers gave me a tea. They said it would help me serve the pack better. You're lying, Cade snarled, taking a step forward. Ronan moved so fast it was almost invisible. One moment he was beside Leora, the next he was in front of Cade, his hand wrapped around the Alpha's throat, lifting him off the ground. Say that again, Ronan said softly. Cade clawed at Ronan's hand, his face turning red, but the Alpha King's grip didn't loosen. Your Majesty, Jareth called from the back, his voice calm. Perhaps we should allow Alpha Cade to defend himself properly. These are serious accusations. Ronan held Cade for 3 more seconds, then dropped him. Cade collapsed his knees, gasping. Fine, Ronan said, stepping back. Defend yourself. Cade struggled to his feet, his hand rubbing his throat. We were trying to help her. She was weak. We thought. You thought you could drain her power for yourselves, Ronan finished. The Moo-bound line doesn't just balance the Alpha King. It can also enhance any alpha it chooses to bond with. Share its strength. Amplify their gifts. His eyes narrowed. How long have you been siphoning her magic? The hall erupted in chaos. Alphas shouted denials. Others demanded investigations. Some looked genuinely shocked, while others, like Jareth, watched with cool, calculating interest. Enough, Ronan roared, and the force of his command slammed into every wolf present, driving them into silence. He turned back to Leora, his expression softening. There's one way to prove this conclusively, he said quietly. But it will require your consent. What do I have to do? Leora asked. Shift. Her heart lurched. I can't. You can, Ronan said firmly. The pendant broke the bindings. The herbs are out of your system. Your wolf is there, Leora. You just have to trust her. Leora looked down at the pendant resting against her chest, still warm, still humming with power. She thought about all the years she'd felt broken. Worthless. Wrong. What if she wasn't? What if they'd just made her believe she was? What happens if I shift? She asked. Ronan's smile was fierce and proud. Then everyone will know exactly what you are. And no one will ever be able to hurt you again. Leora took a deep breath. And then another. She closed her eyes and reached inward, searching for the presence that had been silent for so long. Are you there? For a moment, nothing. And then, a howl. Joyful. Furious. Free. Her wolf surged forward like a tidal wave, and Leora gasped as power flooded through her, bright and fierce and utterly overwhelming. She felt her bones shifting, reshaping, her senses sharpening until she could hear every heartbeat in the room, smell every emotion. When she opened her eyes, the world was different. Sharper. Clearer. Right. She stood on 4 legs now, her fur silver white and gleaming in the torchlight. She was larger than a normal wolf, nearly as tall as Ronan's waist, and her eyes glowed with pale blue light. The hall fell into stunned silence. And then someone whispered, Moon's mercy. She's real. Ronan crouched down beside her, his hand resting gently on her head. Hello, beautiful, he murmured. Leora's wolf rumbled, pleased. Now, Ronan said, standing and turning to face the alphas, does anyone else want to claim she's not Moo-bound? No one spoke. Good, Ronan said coldly. Because here's what's going to happen. Effective immediately, Leora Ashenvale is under my direct protection. She will remain here, in the capital, where she will be trained and educated in her heritage. Any wolf who attempts to harm her, manipulate her, or suppress her gifts again will be executed for treason. He paused, his gaze settling on Cade, Dane, and Ethan. And there will be a full investigation into the northern packs. Anyone found complicit in her abuse will answer to me personally. You can't do this, Cade said, his voice shaking with rage. You're overstepping. I am the Alpha King, Ronan said softly. I don't overstep. I decide. Cade lunged. It was stupid. Desperate. Suicidal. But Leora moved faster. She didn't think, just moved, placing herself between Cade and Ronan, her lips pulled back in a snarl that echoed through the hall like thunder. Cade froze, his eyes wide with shock. Because the sound that came from Leora wasn't just a warning. It was a command. Every wolf in the room felt it, the weight of her dominance pressing down, ancient and absolute. Cade's legs buckled, and he dropped to his knees, his head bowed in submission. Ronan stared at Leora, something like awe flickering in his eyes. Well, he said quietly. That's new. Leora shifted back, her body reforming into human shape, and suddenly she was standing there, naked, trembling, but absolutely alive. Ronan immediately shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. You just dominated an alpha, he murmured, his voice filled with wonder. I didn't mean to, Leora whispered, staring at her hands. He was going to hurt you. Ronan's expression softened into something devastatingly tender. And you protected me. Of course I did, Leora said, looking up at him. You're mine. The words hung in the air between them. Ronan's breath caught. And then, in front of every alpha, every witness, every wolf who had ever doubted her, the Alpha King cupped Leora's face in his hands and kissed her. It was soft, reverent. A promise and a claim all at once. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. Yes, he whispered. I am. The hall erupted again, but this time Leora didn't care. She'd spent her whole life being told she was nothing. Now she knew the truth. She was everything. And the wolves who'd tried to destroy her were about to learn exactly what that meant. But as she stood there, wrapped in Ronan's coat, his arms around her, she caught sight of Jareth in the back of the hall. He wasn't panicking like the others. He was smiling. And something about that smile made ice crawl down her spine. Because she suddenly realized the pendant wasn't the only thing he'd given her. Ronan, she whispered urgently. Something's wrong. But before he could respond, the doors to the hall burst open. A messenger stumbled in, his face pale, his voice shaking. Alpha King, he gasped. The eastern border, it's under attack. Rogues. Hundreds of them. They're saying, he swallowed hard. They're saying they've come for the moonbound. Ronan's expression went ice cold. He turned to Leora, and she saw it in his eyes, the terrible understanding. This wasn't random. This was planned. Someone had known exactly when she would reveal herself. Someone had been waiting. Get her to the safe room, Ronan ordered Kara. Now. No, Leora said firmly, grabbing his arm. I'm not hiding anymore. Leora. They came for me, she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. Then let me face them. Ronan stared at her for a long moment. And then he nodded. Together, he said. Together, Leora agreed. Boom. The moonbound is unleashed. Ronan just claimed her in front of everyone, and now there's an army at the door. If your heart is racing right now, drop a comment and tell me, did you see that kiss coming? The eastern border was burning. Leora could see the orange glow against the night sky even from the walls of the capital, could smell the smoke carried on the wind. She stood beside Ronan on the battlements, dressed now in leather armor that Kara had hastily provided, her heart hammering against her ribs. Below them, the Alpha King's forces were mobilizing, Warriors streaming out of the barracks, weapons being distributed, battle strategies being shouted across the courtyard. How many? Ronan asked the scout who'd just arrived, his voice deadly calm. At least 300, Your Majesty, the scout replied, breathless. Maybe more. They hit the eastern settlements first, burned them. Killed anyone who resisted. They're moving toward the capital now. 300 rogues don't organize themselves, Ronan said coldly. Who's leading them? The scout hesitated. They're flying a banner, sir. Black Wolf on red field. Every muscle in Ronan's body went rigid. That's impossible, he said quietly. What banner is that? Leora asked, dread pooling in her stomach. Ronan didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was hollow. My brothers. Leora's breath caught. You have a brother? Had, Ronan corrected, his jaw tight. Luca. He challenged me for the throne 7 years ago. Lost. I exiled him rather than execute him, sent him beyond the western mountains with a warning never to return. His hands clenched into fists. He swore he'd come back. That he'd take everything I loved and burn it to ash. He's coming for me, Leora whispered. Ronan turned to her, his silver eyes blazing. He's coming for both of us. The Moonbound is the key to challenging my authority. With you under his control, he cut himself off, shaking his head. It doesn't matter. He won't get near you. Ronan. No, he said firmly. I won't lose you. Not now. Not after, his voice cracked, just slightly, and he looked away. Leora stepped closer, placing her hand on his arm. You won't lose me, she said quietly. But you can't fight this alone. I've been fighting alone my whole life, Ronan said, his voice raw. It's what I'm good at. Not anymore, Leora said, meeting his gaze. You have me now. And I'm not going anywhere. For a moment, something vulnerable and desperate flickered in his eyes. Then the alarm bells began to ring. They came like a plague. Hundreds of rogues, wolves who'd rejected pack law, who lived for violence and chaos, poured over the eastern hills like a black tide. They were organized in a way rogues shouldn't be, moving in formations, using tactics that spoke of military training. And at their head rode a wolf Leora had never seen but recognized instantly. Luca Blackthorn. He was tall like Ronan, but leaner, with the same dark hair, but eyes that burned gold instead of silver. He wore black armor decorated with red, and when he shifted, a massive black wolf nearly twice the size of any other, the ground seemed to tremble beneath him. Ronan met him on the field beyond the capital walls, his own wolf form huge and silver-gray, radiating dominance that made even his own warriors take a step back. The two brothers circled each other, snarling. Hello, brother. Luca's voice echoed in the minds of every wolf present, the gift of an alpha, speaking through the pack bond. Miss me? You were warned. Ronan's voice came back, cold as death. You were shown mercy. And you repay it with this. Mercy? Luca laughed, a horrible, jagged sound. You stole my birthright. You exiled me. You left me to rot in the wilderness while you played king. His golden eyes found Leora, who stood with Kara and a contingent of guards behind Ronan's forces. And now you've found yourself a pretty new toy. The last Moonbound. How convenient. She's not a toy, Ronan growled. No, Luca agreed. She's a weapon. And I'm going to take her from you just like you took everything from me. He lunged. The battle exploded across the field. Wolves collided with snarls and screams, teeth and claws tearing into flesh. Blood sprayed across the grass. The night filled with howls, triumph, and agony mixing into a symphony of violence. Ronan and Luca fought like gods, two massive predators trying to destroy each other, their power shaking the earth. They were evenly matched, both alphas, both born to rule. But Luca had rage. And Ronan had something to protect. Leora watched from behind the lines, her heart in her throat, every instinct screaming at her to help. But Kara held her back. You can't, Kara said urgently. If you go out there, you become the target. That's what he wants. I can't just watch him die. Leora shouted. He won't die, Kara said, but her voice wavered with uncertainty. And then Leora saw it, the moment everything changed. One of Luca's rogues broke through the defensive line, moving with purpose, heading straight for the guard contingent. Straight for her. Behind us. Leora screamed. Kara spun, her blade already drawn, and met the rogue head-on. They crashed together in a blur of movement, but more were coming, 5, 6, a dozen rogues all moving with coordinated precision. This wasn't random. This was an extraction. Leora's wolf surged forward, desperate to fight, but she'd only shifted once. She didn't know how to control it. Didn't know how to. A rogue tackled her from the side. She hit the ground hard, the air knocked from her lungs, fangs snapping inches from her throat. She threw up her hands instinctively, and light exploded from her palms, bright, burning silver that sent the rogue flying backward with a yelp of pain. Leora stared at her hands, shocked. What was that? No time to think. Another rogue lunged. She rolled, came up on her feet, and this time when the power surged, she pushed it outward deliberately. A wave of silver energy rippled across the battlefield, and every rogue it touched collapsed, whimpering, unable to move. Every wolf, friend and foe alike, turned to stare at her. Well, came a new voice, smooth and cold. Isn't this interesting? Leora spun around. Jareth stood behind her, flanked by a dozen wolves wearing neutral colors, mercenaries, she realized. Wolves who fought for coin, not loyalty. You, Leora breathed, betrayal cutting through her like a knife. This was you. You planned this. Jareth smiled. Guilty. Though in my defense, it was remarkably easy. Luca wanted revenge. The Northern Alphas wanted you controlled. And he stepped closer. I wanted the moonbound bloodline for myself. Why? Leora demanded, backing away slowly. Because, my dear, Jareth said softly, the moonbound doesn't just balance the Alpha King. With the right rituals, the right sacrifices, a moonbound's power can be transferred. Stolen. His eyes gleamed. And I've spent 30 years learning exactly how to do it. Horror flooded through Leora. You killed my mother. I did, Jareth said with no remorse. And I would have killed you too, if I'd known Mariella had hidden a child. But now he gestured, and the mercenaries moved forward. Now I'll finish what I started. No. The roar came from across the battlefield. Ronan, bloodied, limping, but alive, charged toward them, his wolf form blazing with fury. But he was too far away, and Jareth was too close. The elder moved faster than should have been possible, his hand closing around Leora's throat, lifting her off the ground. One more step, Alpha King, Jareth called out, and I snap her neck. Ronan skidded to a halt, his entire body vibrating with barely controlled rage. Let her go, he growled. I don't think so, Jareth said pleasantly. You see, I've worked too hard for this. And I'm afraid your little mate is coming with me. You won't get away with this, Leora gasped, clawing at his hand. I already have, Jareth said. He looked at Ronan. Oh, and one more thing, those herbs I had the Northern Alphas give her? They weren't just suppressants. They were trackers. Markers. Every dose bonded her magic to a phylactery I've been building for decades. He smiled. Which means when I complete the ritual tonight, all of her power, everything the moonbound line represents, will be mine. No, Leora whispered. Yes, Jareth said. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. He made a gesture, and the mercenaries moved forward, surrounding them both. One threw a net, silver-threaded, enchanted to suppress wolf abilities, over Ronan. He collapsed with a roar of pain, unable to shift back, unable to break free. Ronan! Leora screamed, thrashing in Jareth's grip. Sleep now, little moonbound, Jareth murmured and pressed something cold against her neck. Pain lanced through her, sharp, chemical, burning. The world tilted. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Ronan, trapped and bleeding, howling her name. And then, nothing. When Leora awoke, she was underground. She could feel it, the weight of earth above her, the cold stone beneath her, the absolute absence of moonlight. She was bound to a stone altar with silver chains that burned against her skin, dressed in a thin white robe that wasn't hers. Candles surrounded her in a circle, hundreds of them, their flames casting dancing shadows on the cavern walls. And standing at the edge of the circle, wearing ceremonial robes and holding a blade that gleamed with dark magic, was Jareth. "Ah, you're awake," he said pleasantly. "Excellent. The ritual works best when the subject is conscious." "You won't get away with this," Leora said, her voice hoarse. She pulled against the chains, but they held fast. "Ronan will find me." "I doubt it," Jareth said, moving closer. "We're 3 miles underground in a bunker that's been shielded against magical detection for centuries. Even if he knew where to look, which he doesn't, he'd never reach you in time." "Why are you doing this?" Leora asked desperately. "Why do you want this power so badly?" Jareth's expression darkened. "Because I've watched mediocre men become kings while brilliant minds like mine are cast aside. Because I've seen the corruption, the waste, the endless cycles of dominance and violence." He leaned closer. "Because I deserve to rule. And with the Moonbound's power, no one, not even the Alpha King, will be able to stop me." He raised the blade. "This will hurt," he said almost apologetically. But only for a moment. Leora closed her eyes, reaching desperately for her wolf, for the bond, for anything. And felt nothing. The silver chains had cut her off completely. She was alone. Helpless. And no one was coming to save her. The blade descended. The blade touched her skin. And the world screamed. Not with sound, with feeling. Every candle in the cavern exploded into silver flame. The chains holding Leora shattered like glass. The stone altar beneath her cracked down the middle with a sound like thunder. Jareth flew backward, slamming into the cavern wall. Leora gasped, her body arcing off the altar as power flooded through her, not from the pendant, not from anything external, but from within. From a place so deep and ancient she hadn't known it existed. Her wolf howled in triumph. And for the first time, Leora understood. The chains hadn't cut her off from her power. They'd cut her off from the suppression that had been placed on her power. All those years of herbs, of rituals, of bindings, they'd been holding back something massive. Something terrifying. Something that was now breaking free. She rose from the altar, her feet touching the ground, and silver light radiated from her skin like a second sun. Her eyes glowed, not pale blue anymore, but brilliant white, burning with the moon's own fire. Jareth struggled to his feet, blood running from his nose, his eyes wide with shock. "Impossible," he breathed. "The silver should have." "You don't understand what I am," Leora said, and her voice echoed with harmonics, layered, ancient, more. "You studied the legends. You murdered my mother. You spent decades trying to steal this power." She stepped forward, and Jareth stumbled back. "But you never asked the most important question." "What question?" Jareth whispered. Leora smiled, and it was not kind. Why the Moonbound line was created to balance the Alpha King, and not to serve him. She raised her hand. The silver light coalesced into a blade, solid, gleaming, made of pure moonlight. "Because," Leora said softly, "we were made to be equals." She struck. Jareth barely managed to throw up a shield, dark magic crackling to life in front of him. The two powers collided with a sound like reality tearing, and the cavern shook. "You're untrained," Jareth snarled, pouring more power into his shield. "You don't even know what you're doing." "I know enough," Leora said. And she did. Somehow she did. The knowledge was rising inside her like muscle memory, centuries of moonbound wisdom, passed down through blood and bone, waiting for this moment. She could feel her ancestors standing with her, their voices whispering guidance. "Trust your instincts. The moon is with you." You are not alone. Leora pushed harder, and Jareth's shield began to crack. No, he gasped. No. He dropped the shield and lunged for her, the dark blade in his hand aimed at her heart. Leora moved on pure instinct, stepped aside, caught his wrist, and drove her moonlight blade through his shoulder. Jareth screamed. That's for my mother, Leora said coldly. She twisted the blade. And that's for every year you stole from me. She released him, and he collapsed to the ground, gasping, his dark magic flickering and dying. You can't kill me, he wheezed. I'm a council elder. There are laws. Laws you broke when you murdered a moonbound heir, Leora said. When you conspired with rogues. When you tried to steal power that was never yours to take. She crouched down, meeting his eyes. I'm not going to kill you, Jareth. I'm going to let Ronan decide what to do with you. And something tells me he won't be as merciful as I am. She stood, turned away from him, and froze. The entrance to the cavern was blocked by 3 wolves. Not rogues. Not mercenaries. Cade, Dane, Ethan, the Northern Alphas. Well, Cade said, his voice dripping with false regret. This is unfortunate. Leora's hand tightened on her moonlight blade. You're working with him. We were, Ethan corrected. Until it became clear his ritual was going to kill you. That wasn't part of the arrangement. The arrangement was to keep you weak, Dane added. Controllable. We've been siphoning your power for years, just enough to strengthen our packs, but not enough to kill you. You were too valuable. But now, Cade said, stepping forward, now you're awake. Powerful. Dangerous. He smiled. So we need to correct that mistake. 3 alphas. 3 of the strongest wolves in the territory. Against 1 exhausted, barely trained moonbound. Leora raised her blade. Try, she said quietly. They lunged as one. Leora didn't think. She moved. The moonlight blade extended, splitting into 3 separate tendrils of silver light that lashed out like whips. Cade dodged, but Dane caught one across the chest and went down howling. Ethan shifted mid-leap, his wolf form massive and scarred, jaws snapping toward her throat. Leora threw up a shield, instinctive, desperate, and Ethan's teeth scraped against solid light. She pushed back, and he flew across the cavern, crashing into the wall. But Cade was on her. His hand closed around her throat, lifting her off the ground. You should have stayed weak, he snarled. Should have stayed grateful for what we gave you. Leora couldn't breathe. Black spots danced across her vision. No, not like this. She reached for the bond, the connection to Ronan that hummed beneath her skin, and pulled. Help me. The response was immediate. Hold on. 3 miles above, Ronan tore through the silver net with his bare hands. It shouldn't have been possible. The enchantments should have held him for hours, maybe days. But the moment he felt Leora's call, desperate, terrified, fighting, something inside him broke. Or maybe it unlocked. The bond between an Alpha King and his moonbound wasn't just spiritual. It was power. And when they called to each other, that power answered. Ronan shifted back to human form, grabbed his sword from where it had fallen, and turned to the wolves still standing, his own warriors, bloodied but alive. With me, he commanded. Now. Your Majesty, we don't know where. I know exactly where she is, Ronan said, because he did. The bond was a compass, pulling him south, down, underground. Anyone who wants to follow can follow. Anyone who doesn't can get out of my way. He ran. And his warriors followed. Cade's grip tightened, and Leora's vision began to blur. She clawed at his hand, but he was too strong, and she was too tired, and the moonlight blade was flickering, dying. The cavern entrance exploded. Stone and dust flew everywhere as Ronan crashed through, his sword blazing with silver light, their light, the bond feeding power into the blade, making it burn like a star. Get away from her. His voice wasn't just commanding. It was absolute. Every wolf in the cavern, alpha or not, felt their knees buckle under the weight of his dominance. Cade dropped Leora and stumbled back, his face pale. Ronan caught her before she hit the ground, gathering her into his arms. "I've got you," he whispered fiercely. "I've got you." Leora gasped for air, her hands clutching his shirt. "You came." "Always," Ronan said, his voice breaking. "Always." Behind them, his warriors poured into the cavern, 20 wolves, armed and furious, surrounding the northern alphas. Ronan stood, carefully setting Leora on her feet, but keeping one arm around her waist. "Cade, Dane, Ethan," he said quietly. "You're all under arrest for conspiracy, treason, and attempted murder of the moonbound heir." "You have no proof," Cade started. "I have her testimony," Ronan said. "I have the herbs. I have Jareth's confession, yes, he's still alive, and I have 20 witnesses who just saw you attack her." His smile was cold. "But most importantly, I have her." He looked at Leora. "Tell me what you want," he said softly, "and I'll make it happen." Leora looked at the 3 alphas who had spent years draining her, hurting her, making her believe she was nothing. She could kill them. She had the power now. But as she stood there, wrapped in Ronan's strength, feeling the bond between them humming with life and light, she realized something. They'd already lost. "I want them stripped of their titles," she said clearly. "I want their packs dissolved and integrated into others who will actually care for them. And I want them exiled, sent so far away they'll never hurt anyone again." "Done," Ronan said immediately. "No," Cade shouted. "You can't." "I just did," Ronan said. "Take them." The warriors moved forward, binding the 3 alphas in silver chains. Dane looked at Leora, something like fear in his eyes. "You'll regret this." "Without us." "Without you," Leora said quietly, "I'll finally be free." They were dragged away, still shouting threats and protests. Jareth was collected as well, barely conscious, bleeding, broken. And then it was just Leora and Ronan in the cavern, surrounded by shattered stone and dying candles. "Are you hurt?" Ronan asked immediately, his hands running over her arms, her shoulders, checking for injuries. "I'm okay," Leora said. Her voice caught. "You came for me." "Of course I did," Ronan said fiercely. "Did you think I wouldn't? Did you think I'd just let them take you?" "I thought," Leora's eyes filled with tears. "I thought maybe the bond was all you cared about. The power. The balance." Ronan cupped her face in his hands, his silver eyes burning into hers. "I don't give a damn about the bond," he said roughly. "I mean, yes, it's there, and yes, it's real, but Leora," his voice broke. "I would have come for you anyway. Bond or no bond. Power or no power. Because somewhere between that first moment in the hall and now, you became mine. Not because of magic or destiny or ancient bloodlines." He pressed his forehead against hers. "Because I chose you. And I will keep choosing you. Every single day. For the rest of my life." Leora's tears spilled over. "I choose you too," she whispered. She took a shaky breath. "I think I love you." Ronan smiled, really smiled, bright and genuine and devastating. "You think?" he teased gently. "I've never done this before," Leora admitted. "I don't know if I'm doing it right." "You're doing it perfectly," Ronan said softly. And then he kissed her slow and deep and tender, pouring everything he couldn't say into the gesture. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Leora laughed, shaky but real. "We should probably get out of this creepy underground cavern," she said. "Probably," Ronan agreed. But he didn't let go of her. "Can you walk?" "I can run," Leora said. "I can fly. I can do anything right now." Because she was free. Finally, truly free. And she had someone who would fight beside her. Not in front of her. Not for her. Beside her. As equals. They emerged from the underground just as dawn was breaking. The battle was over. Luca had been captured, bound in chains, and surrounded by guards. The rogues had scattered when their leader fell. And the capital stood. Damaged. Bloodied. But standing. As Leora and Ronan walked through the gates, every wolf they passed stopped and bowed. Not just to the Alpha King. to both of them. The moonbound and her king. Balance restored. The throne room had never been so full. Every surviving alpha from every pack had been summoned to bear witness. The hall was packed with wolves, some injured, some exhausted, all silent as they waited for the Alpha King to speak. Leora stood beside Ronan on the raised platform, no longer hidden in shadows, no longer kneeling. She wore a gown of midnight blue that Ronan had commissioned overnight, simple but elegant, with silver embroidery along the collar that caught the light. The moonbound pendant rested against her chest, no longer a tracker, but reclaimed as her birthright. She looked like what she was. Royalty. Ronan stood in full ceremonial armor, his expression carved from stone as he surveyed the assembled wolves. The weight of his dominance filled the room, but this time, Leora felt something different threading through it. Her power, amplifying his. Balancing it. Making it stronger and more merciful. 3 days ago, Ronan began, his voice carrying easily through the hall. I asked a question that no one wanted to answer. Today, we have our answers. He gestured, and guards dragged forward 4 prisoners, Cade, Dane, Ethan, and Jareth, all bound in silver chains, all looking far less confident than they had days before. These wolves, Ronan continued, conspired to suppress, abuse, and attempt to murder the last heir of the moonbound line. They siphoned her power for their own gain. They erased her history. They made her believe she was nothing. His voice hardened. And they nearly succeeded. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Under pack law, Ronan said, their crimes warrant execution. Cade's head snapped up, eyes wide with fear. Your Majesty, please. Silence, Ronan commanded, and Cade's jaw snapped shut involuntarily. However, pack law also states that crimes against the moonbound line fall under her jurisdiction, not mine. He turned to Leora. The decision is yours. Every eye in the room turned to her. Leora's heart hammered, but she kept her expression calm. She'd known this moment was coming. Had spent the entire night thinking about what justice actually meant. She stepped forward. For years, she said quietly, I believed the lies you told me. That I was weak. Broken. That I should be grateful you kept me alive. Her gaze swept across the 4 prisoners. You took everything from me, my name, my family, my power, myself. You made me afraid to exist. Jareth looked away, shame flickering across his face. The 3 alphas remained defiant, but she could see the fear underneath. And part of me, Leora continued, her voice growing stronger, wants to make you feel what I felt. Wants to strip everything from you the way you stripped it from me. She paused. But that would make me like you. And I refuse to let you turn me into something cruel. She looked at Ronan, then back at the prisoners. Jareth, she said, you murdered my mother. For that, you will spend the rest of your life imprisoned in the mountain cells, with no magic, no power, no freedom. You wanted to live forever by stealing my bloodline. Instead, you'll have a very long time to regret your choices. Jareth's head dropped. Cade, Dane, Ethan, Leora continued. You 3 will be stripped of your alpha titles and exiled to the wastelands beyond the western border. You'll have nothing, no pack, no rank, no protection. You'll survive only if you can learn to rely on something other than dominance and cruelty. She smiled coldly. Consider it an education. You can't, Dane started. She can, Ronan interrupted. And she has. Any objections? Silence. Good, Ronan said. Take them away. As the guards dragged the 4 prisoners out, Jareth silent, the 3 alphas shouting protests that no one listened to, Leora felt something release in her chest. Not revenge. Freedom. She'd faced the wolves who hurt her and chosen mercy over vengeance. And somehow, that made her stronger than any of them had ever been. But the tribunal wasn't over. There's one more matter, Ronan said, his voice softer now. He turned to face the assembled alphas. For 400 years, the Alpha King ruled alone. The system worked barely. But it also led to corruption, abuse, imbalance. He paused. The moonbound line was created to prevent that, to ensure no single wolf held absolute power. He held out his hand to Leora. She took it, her fingers threading through his. I stand before you not just as your king, Ronan said, but as one half of a partnership that was designed to serve you all. Leora Ashenvale is the last moonbound heir. She is my fated mate. And as of tonight, he looked at her, his expression open and vulnerable. If she'll have me, she will also be my queen. Gasps echoed through the hall. Leora's breath caught. Ronan. He turned to face her fully, still holding her hand. I know this is fast, he said quietly, just for her. I know we've only had days together. But I also know that I don't want to rule without you. I don't want to exist without you. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. You said you chose me. Let me choose you too. Publicly. Permanently. Let me give you everything they tried to take, a name, a title, a place where you belong. Tears burned in Leora's eyes. I already have a place, she whispered. With you. Then make it official, Ronan said, a small smile playing at his lips. Marry me, Leora. Be my queen. Be my balance. Be my equal in every way. Leora looked at him, this powerful, complicated, fierce man who had seen her at her lowest and refused to let her stay there. Who had fought for her. Protected her. Chosen her. Yes, she said, her voice breaking with joy. Yes. The hall erupted in cheers. Ronan pulled her close and kissed her, claiming and tender and full of promise, and the bond between them flared bright enough that several wolves swore later they could see the silver light radiating from the platform. When they finally broke apart, both of them laughing and breathless, Ronan addressed the crowd once more. The coronation will take place in 1 week, he announced. Every pack is invited. Every wolf is welcome. His gaze swept the room. We enter a new era tonight. One of balance, partnership, justice. He looked at Leora. One where no one has to ask who hurt them because we'll make sure no one is hurt to begin with. The cheers rose again, louder this time. But there was still one thread left to tie off. After the tribunal ended and the crowds dispersed, Leora found herself standing in one of the private council rooms with a person she'd never expected to see again. Anna. The older healer stood near the window, her expression cautious. You asked to see me, Leora said quietly, closing the door behind her. I did, Anna said. She turned, and Leora saw tears in her eyes. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago. Leora's stomach tightened. What? Anna took a shaky breath. I knew. About the herbs. About what they were doing to you. The words hit like a physical blow. What? Leora whispered. I didn't know everything, Anna said quickly. I didn't know about the moonbound bloodline or the rituals. But I knew the supplements they were giving you weren't normal. I suspected they were suppressants. Her voice cracked. And I said nothing. Because I was afraid. Because they threatened to kill my daughter if I interfered. Leora's hands clenched into fists. You let them hurt me. Yes, Anna said, tears streaming down her face now. I did. And I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But I need you to know I tried. In small ways. I diluted the doses when I could. I taught you healing so you'd have value, so they'd keep you alive. She broke off, sobbing. I'm so sorry, Leora. I'm so sorry. Leora stood frozen, emotions warring inside her. Anger. Betrayal. But also understanding. Because she knew what it was like to be powerless. To make impossible choices just to survive. Where's your daughter now? Leora asked quietly. Safe, Anna said. Living with her father's pack in the south. Away from all of this. Leora nodded slowly. Then she crossed the room and stopped in front of Anna. The older woman flinched as if expecting a blow. Instead, Leora wrapped her arms around her. Thank you, Leora whispered, for trying. Anna broke down completely, clinging to Leora like a lifeline. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Anna sobbed. Maybe not, Leora said gently. But I'm giving it anyway. Because holding on to hate would poison me, and I refuse to let them win that way too. She pulled back, wiping her own eyes. You can stay in the capital if you want, Leora said. Work with the healers here. Or you can go be with your daughter. Either way, she managed a small smile. You're free. We both are. Anna nodded, unable to speak. As Leora left the room, she felt another weight lift from her shoulders. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing what happened. It was about refusing to carry the burden anymore. That night, Leora stood on the balcony of her new chambers, rooms adjacent to Ronan's, connected by a door that was always open. The moon was full overhead, bright and beautiful, and for the first time in her life, Leora felt its power flowing through her without pain or suppression. Just pure, clean magic. Beautiful, isn't it? She turned to find Ronan leaning against the doorframe, still in his armor, but looking far more relaxed than he had in the throne room. It is, Leora agreed. She held out her hand. Come here. He crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. They stood like that for a long moment, just breathing together. Are you scared? Ronan asked quietly. About becoming queen? Terrified, Leora admitted. I barely know how to be myself, let alone royalty. Good, Ronan said. So am I. We'll figure it out together. Leora turned in his arms to face him. Do you really think this can work? The balance? The partnership? I know it can, Ronan said firmly. Because we're not doing this the old way, one ruler dictating from above. We're doing this as equals. Your voice matters as much as mine. Your choices carry the same weight. He cupped her face gently. You're not my subject, Leora. You're my partner. And together, he smiled. Together, we're going to change everything. Leora kissed him, pouring all her hope and fear and love into the gesture. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. I love you, she said. Not because of the bond. Not because of destiny. Because of who you are. Because you saw me when I was invisible and refused to look away. I love you too, Ronan whispered. And I promise no one will ever hurt you again. Not while I'm breathing. We'll protect each other, Leora corrected gently. That's what partners do. Ronan's smile was brilliant and genuine. Yes, he agreed. They do. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms beneath the full moon, the bond between them pulsed bright and strong, not a chain binding them together, but a bridge connecting two equals. The Alpha King and his moon-bound queen. The beginning of something new. Something better. Something balanced. 1 week later, the coronation ceremony was held under the full moon. The great stone hall had been transformed. Silver banners hung from every column, embroidered with both the Alpha King's crest and a new symbol, a crescent moon intertwined with a wolf, representing the union of their bloodlines. Flowers that only bloomed at night lined the aisle, their petals glowing faintly with bioluminescence. Every pack in the territory had sent representatives, and the hall was filled to capacity with wolves dressed in their finest ceremonial attire. But Leora barely noticed any of it. She stood in a private chamber adjacent to the hall, staring at her reflection in the full-length mirror, and hardly recognized herself. The gown was breathtaking, midnight blue silk that flowed like water, with intricate silver embroidery that traced patterns of moon phases across the bodice and down the skirt. The neckline was modest but elegant, and long sleeves hugged her arms before flaring slightly at the wrists. Her dark hair had been styled in loose waves, pulled partially back with silver pins shaped like crescent moons, and the moon-bound pendant, now cleansed and reclaimed, rested against her collarbone. She looked like a queen. She felt like an imposter. You're doing that thing again, came a familiar voice. Leora turned to find Maya standing in the doorway, wearing a soft green dress and a knowing smile. What thing? Leora asked. That thing where you look absolutely stunning, but your face says you're about to flee the country. Maya crossed the room and adjusted one of the pins in Leora's hair. You're allowed to be nervous, you know. This is kind of a big deal. Kind of. Leora let out a shaky laugh. Maya, I'm about to become queen of every pack in the territory. A week ago, I couldn't even shift properly. What if I mess this up? What if you don't? Maya interrupted gently. She took Leora's hands, squeezing them. You've already proven you're strong enough to survive the worst they could throw at you. This is just the next step. And you won't be doing it alone. As if summoned by the words, there was a soft knock on the door. Come in, Leora called. The door opened, and Anna stepped inside, followed by 3 other healers, women Leora had worked with over the years, women who had witnessed her suffering and, in their own small ways, tried to help. We wanted to see you before the ceremony, Anna said softly. She held out a small wooden box. And to give you this. Leora took the box with trembling hands. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a bracelet, simple silver with small moonstone beads interspersed throughout. It was your mother's, Anna explained, her eyes shining with tears. I kept it hidden all these years, waiting for the right moment to give it to you. She wore it every day. Said it reminded her that, even in darkness, there's always light. Leora's vision blurred as she lifted the bracelet from the box. It was warm to the touch, humming faintly with residual magic, her mother's magic, preserved across the years. Thank you, she whispered, slipping it onto her wrist. It fit perfectly. Your mother would be so proud of you, Anna said. We all are. The other healers nodded, murmuring agreements. You showed us what real strength looks like, one of them said. Not domination. Not cruelty. But choosing mercy even when you had every right to choose vengeance. You're going to be an incredible queen, Maya added firmly. And we're going to be here, supporting you every step of the way. Leora looked at these women, some who had failed her, some who had tried to help, all of them flawed and human and present, and felt something warm bloom in her chest. Community. Family. Home. Thank you, she said again, her voice thick with emotion. All of you. There was another knock, firmer this time. Kara poked her head in, her usual stern expression softened slightly. It's time, Your Majesty. Leora's stomach flipped. Already? Ronan's waiting, Kara said, and something almost like a smile tugged at her lips. And between you and me? He's been pacing for the last 20 minutes. You might want to put him out of his misery. Maya laughed. The great Alpha King nervous? I never thought I'd see the day. Everyone's nervous when it matters, Kara said simply. She held out her arm. Ready? Leora took a deep breath, smoothing down her gown one last time. Ready, she said. The walk to the hall felt both endless and far too short. As Leora approached the great iron doors, she could hear the low hum of conversation on the other side, the shuffle of hundreds of wolves waiting, watching. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. The doors opened, and the hall fell silent. Every eye turned to her. For a moment, Leora froze, caught in that old instinct to shrink, to hide, to disappear. But then she saw him. Ronan stood at the far end of the hall, on the raised platform in front of the throne. He wore full ceremonial armor, black and silver, polished to a gleaming shine, with his family crest emblazoned on the chest plate. A long cloak fell from his shoulders, and a circlet of silver rested on his dark hair. He looked every inch the king he was. But when his eyes found hers, all that power and authority melted away, replaced by something softer. Something that was just for her. Wonder. Pride. Love. He smiled, not the cold, calculating expression he wore in council, but the real one. The one that made her heart skip. And suddenly, Leora wasn't afraid anymore. She lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and walked forward. The aisle stretched before her, lined with wolves who had once ignored her, dismissed her, hurt her. But as she passed, they didn't look away. They bowed. Not out of fear or obligation. Out of respect. Every step brought her closer to Ronan, closer to the life she'd never dared to dream of. And with each step, she felt the weight of the past falling away, the abuse, The suppression, the years of believing she was nothing. She wasn't nothing. She was everything. When she reached the platform, Ronan descended the steps to meet her. He held out his hand, and she took it without hesitation. "You're late," he murmured, though his eyes danced with amusement. "Had to make an entrance," Leora whispered back. "It worked," Ronan said softly. "You look," his voice caught. "You're beautiful." "So are you," Leora said, and meant it. Together, they ascended the steps and stood before the elder counselor, an ancient wolf named Theron who had served 5 Alpha Kings and had come out of retirement specifically for this ceremony. "Wolves of the Packs," Theron began, his voice surprisingly strong for someone so old, "we gather tonight under the full moon to witness a restoration. 400 years ago, our ancestors created a system of balance, the Alpha King wielding strength and justice, and the Moonbound offering wisdom and mercy. For too long, that balance has been broken. Tonight, we restore it." He turned to Ronan. "Ronan Blackthorn, Alpha King, do you accept the responsibility of ruling with both strength and compassion? Do you pledge to protect your people, to listen to counsel, and to share your power with the one fated to stand beside you?" "I do," Ronan said clearly, his gaze never leaving Leora's face. Theron turned to Leora. "Leora Ashenvale, last heir of the Moonbound line, do you accept the responsibility of balancing the throne? Do you pledge to amplify justice, temper harshness, and stand as equal to the Alpha King in all matters of rule?" Leora's voice rang out strong and sure. "I do." "Then by the authority granted to me by the Council of Elders and witnessed by every pack in this territory, I bind you together, not just as mates, but as partners. Equals. The balance restored." He raised his hands, and moonlight streamed through the great windows, bathing both Leora and Ronan in silver light. The bond between them flared brilliant and blinding, visible to every wolf present, a column of pure energy connecting them, amplifying them, completing them. Gasps echoed through the hall. Theron smiled, the first real smile Leora had ever seen on the ancient wolf's face. "I present to you," he declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, Alpha King Ronan Blackthorn and Moonbound Queen Leora Ashenvale. May they rule with wisdom, strength, and unity. May their partnership bring peace and prosperity to all packs. And may no wolf ever forget that true power lies not in domination, but in balance. The hall erupted in cheers. Ronan pulled Leora close and kissed her, not the tentative, questioning kiss of their first time, but a declaration. A promise. A celebration of everything they'd survived and everything they were becoming. When they pulled apart, both breathless and smiling, Ronan rested his forehead against hers. "Ready to change the world," he murmured. "With you," Leora whispered back. "Always." The celebration that followed was unlike anything Leora had ever experienced. Tables laden with food filled the courtyards. Musicians played traditional pack songs mixed with newer melodies. Wolves danced, laughed, shared stories. The barriers between packs seemed to dissolve in the moonlight, replaced by genuine community. Leora found herself swept from conversation to conversation. Alphas who had once ignored her now sought her counsel. Healers who had witnessed her transformation asked to learn from her. Young wolves looked at her with hope in their eyes. "Your Majesty," a young girl said shyly, tugging on Leora's sleeve. She couldn't have been more than 10. "Is it true that you couldn't shift before?" Leora crouched down to the girl's level. "It's true. For a very long time, I thought I was broken." "But you're not," the girl said, her eyes wide. "No," Leora agreed. "I wasn't broken. I was just restrained. And once those restraints were removed, I discovered I was stronger than I ever imagined." "I can't shift yet either," the girl admitted quietly. "The other kids tease me. They say I'm weak." Leora's heart ached. She reached out and gently took the girl's hand. "Listen to me carefully. Being unable to shift doesn't make you weak. It makes you patient. And when your wolf finally comes, and she'll be worth the wait. She smiled. Besides, some of the strongest wolves I know took years to shift. Strength isn't about how early you develop your gifts. It's about what you do with them once they arrive. The girl's face lit up. Really? Really, Leora said firmly. Now go enjoy the party. And remember, you're not weak. You're just getting started. The girl hugged her quickly before running off to rejoin her friends. When Leora stood, she found Ronan watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. What? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. Nothing, he said, moving to her side and slipping his arm around her waist. Just admiring my incredibly wise, compassionate, perfect wife. We're not married yet, Leora pointed out. That's next month. Technicality, Ronan said, pressing a kiss to her temple. You're mine. The ceremony is just paperwork. Leora laughed, leaning into him. Romantic. I have my moments, Ronan murmured. Then his expression grew more serious. Did you mean what you told that girl? About strength. Every word, Leora said. Why? Because I need to hear it too sometimes, Ronan admitted quietly. Need to remember that strength isn't just about dominance or control. That admitting weakness, asking for help, sharing power, that takes more courage than ruling alone ever did. Leora turned in his arms, cupping his face in her hands. Then let me remind you every single day. That's what partners do. Ronan's smile was brilliant. What did I do to deserve you? You saw me, Leora said simply. When everyone else looked away, you saw me. And you refused to let me stay invisible. Best decision I ever made, Ronan said, and kissed her again. As the night wore on and the celebration continued, Leora found a quiet moment alone on one of the upper balconies, looking out over the capital. From here, she could see the entire city spread out below, lights twinkling, wolves celebrating, life thriving. The eastern settlements were already being rebuilt. The northern packs were under new leadership, alphas chosen for their compassion and wisdom rather than their ability to dominate. Refugees from Luca's attack were being welcomed and integrated. Change was happening. Real, lasting change. And she was part of it. Hey there, beautiful souls. Leora jumped, spinning around to find Maya and Kara approaching, both carrying glasses of wine. We come bearing gifts, Maya said, handing Leora a glass. And also, we wanted to steal you for a minute before Ronan finds you again and whisks you off to do more queenly things. Queenly things. Leora laughed, accepting the wine. You know, Kara said dryly. Standing regally. Looking wise. Making everyone else feel inadequate with your perfect hair. I don't, Leora started. Oh, you absolutely do, Maya interrupted with a grin. But we love you anyway. Her expression softened. Seriously though, we're proud of you. Both of us. Even me, Kara admitted, which was significant coming from the usually stoic guard. You could have become bitter. Vengeful. Instead, you chose mercy. Grace. That takes strength most wolves never develop. Leora felt tears prick her eyes. I had good examples, she said, looking at both of them. People who showed me that strength could be gentle. That power could be used to protect instead of harm. Group hug, Maya suggested. Absolutely not, Kara started, but Maya pulled her in anyway, and somehow Leora found herself sandwiched between the two women, laughing and crying at the same time. When they finally pulled apart, all three of them wiping their eyes, Leora felt something settle in her chest. This was what family felt like. Not blood. Not obligation. Choice. Later, much later, when the celebration had finally wound down and most of the guests had departed, Leora found herself back in her chambers with Ronan. He'd shed the ceremonial armor in favor of simple dark pants and a loose shirt, and he looked more relaxed than she'd seen him in days. He stood by the window, looking out at the moon, and Leora took a moment just to watch him. Her mate. Her partner. Her equal. I can feel you staring, Ronan said without turning around, amusement in his voice. I'm admiring, Leora corrected, moving to join him. There's a difference. Ronan turned, pulling her into his arms. How are you feeling? Tonight was a lot. Overwhelmed, Leora admitted. Grateful. Terrified. Happy. She looked up at him. How about you? All of that, Ronan agreed. Plus incredibly proud. You were amazing tonight, Leora. Natural. Like you were born to do this. Maybe I was, Leora said thoughtfully. I just needed the chance to discover it. They stood like that for a while, wrapped in each other, the moonlight streaming through the window. Finally, Ronan spoke. Can I tell you something? Anything. When I first saw you in that hall, that first night, something in me knew, Ronan said quietly. I didn't understand it yet. Didn't know about the bond or the bloodline or any of it. But I looked at you and I felt this pull. This certainty that you were important. That you mattered. He cupped her face gently. And I was right. You do matter. Not because of your bloodline or your power, but because of who you are. The choices you make. The compassion you show. The strength you carry. Leora's eyes filled with tears. I love you, she whispered. So much it scares me sometimes. Good, Ronan said, his own voice rough with emotion. Be scared with me. Be brave with me. Be everything with me. Always, Leora promised. And as they kissed, the bond between them hummed with contentment, two souls, balanced and whole, ready to face whatever came next. Together. 6 months later. Leora stood in the council chamber, reviewing reports with a small group of advisors. The reforms were working, pack violence had decreased by 40%, interpack cooperation was at an all-time high, and the healing programs she'd implemented were saving lives across the territory. But there were still challenges. Always challenges. The western border settlements are requesting more resources, one advisor said. They're still rebuilding from Luca's attack. Grant it, Leora said immediately. And send additional healers. I want those settlements thriving, not just surviving. Yes, Your Majesty. Also, Leora continued, scanning the next report, I'm seeing concerning patterns in the refugee integration. Some of the southern packs are slow to accept newcomers. I want to visit personally, meet with their alphas, understand the resistance, and find solutions. I'll arrange the trip, another advisor said, making notes. The meeting continued for another hour, covering everything from trade agreements to judicial reforms to education programs. When it finally ended and the advisors filed out, Leora sagged slightly in her chair. Being queen was exhausting, but also exhilarating. Ronan entered through the side door, carrying 2 cups of tea. Thought you might need this, he said, setting one in front of her. You're a lifesaver, Leora said gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Ronan settled into the chair beside her. How did it go? Good. Challenging. We're making progress, but there's still so much to do. She looked at him. How was your meeting? Productive. The northern packs are finally starting to function under the new leadership. There's still some resentment, but it's fading. He paused. Actually, one of the new alphas specifically asked if you'd visit soon. Said her pack would benefit from hearing your story directly. Leora smiled. I can do that. Next month, maybe? Works for me. Ronan reached over and took her hand, threading their fingers together. You're incredible, you know that? You've mentioned it once or twice, Leora teased. I'll mention it again tomorrow, Ronan promised. And every day after that. A knock on the door interrupted them. Come in, Leora called. Kara entered, her expression carefully neutral. Your Majesties. There's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. Who? Ronan asked, his tone immediately shifting to alert. Kara stepped aside, and a young woman entered, maybe 20 years old, with dark hair and frightened amber eyes. She was thin, dressed in travel-worn clothes, and she carried the scent of someone who'd been running for days. Please, the girl said, her voice shaking. I heard stories. About the moonbound queen. About how she survived when everyone said she was weak. about how she found her power and chose mercy instead of revenge. Tears streamed down her face. I need help. My pack, they're doing to me what was done to you. Suppressing my wolf. Draining my power. I tried to run, but they'll find me. Unless, she dropped to her knees. Unless you help me. Leora was on her feet instantly, crossing to the girl and helping her up. What's your name? June, the girl whispered. June, Leora repeated gently. You're safe now. Do you understand? You're under my protection. No one will hurt you here. June sobbed, collapsing against Leora. Over the girl's shoulder, Leora met Ronan's gaze. She saw understanding there. Determination. Because this wasn't over. There would be more Junes. More wolves suppressed, abused, told they were nothing. But now there was also hope. Now there was proof that survival was possible. That power could be reclaimed. That mercy could be stronger than vengeance. Now there was a moonbound queen who would fight for every single one of them. Come on, Leora said softly to June. Let's get you settled. And then we'll figure out how to help you find your power too. As she led the girl out of the council chamber, Ronan at her side, Leora felt the truth settle in her bones. This was her purpose. Not just ruling, but protecting, healing, showing others that they didn't have to stay invisible, that they could step into the light, just like she had. 1 year later, the first annual Moonbound Academy graduation took place in the Great Hall, transformed once again, this time with banners representing every pack, flowers of every color, and a sense of celebration that filled the air like music. 30 young wolves stood on the platform, healers, scholars, warriors, all of them once considered weak or broken, all of them now graduating with full honors and ready to return to their packs. Leora stood at the podium, looking out at their hopeful faces, and remembered what it felt like to believe she was nothing. A wise person once told me, she began, her voice carrying through the hall, that strength isn't about how early you develop your gifts. It's about what you do with them once they arrive. She smiled. This academy was created for every wolf who was told they weren't enough, who was overlooked, dismissed, or suppressed. You've proven that those voices were wrong. She gestured to the graduates. You are healers who will save lives. Scholars who will preserve our history. Warriors who will protect the vulnerable. Leaders who will show others that power can be gentle and strength can be merciful. And every single one of you is proof that being underestimated doesn't mean being weak. It just means people weren't looking closely enough. The graduates stood taller, pride shining in their eyes. Go back to your packs, Leora continued. Show them what you've learned. Be living examples of the truth, that every wolf has value, every gift matters, and true strength comes from lifting others up rather than pushing them down. Her voice softened. And if you ever doubt yourselves, remember this moment. Remember that you graduated from an academy created by someone who couldn't shift for years, who was told she was nothing, who became a queen anyway. The hall erupted in applause. As the graduates received their certificates and filed out to begin their new lives, Leora felt Ronan's hand slip into hers. You did that, he murmured. Created something that will change lives for generations. We did that, Leora corrected. Together. Together, Ronan agreed, pulling her close. And as they stood there, watching the future they'd helped build walk out into the world, Leora finally understood what her mother must have known all those years ago. That being moonbound wasn't about the magic or the power. It was about being the light that helped others find their way out of darkness. Being proof that survival was possible. That healing was real. That even when the world tried to break you, you could choose to become something beautiful instead. You made it to the end. I'm so proud of you for sticking with Leora and Ronan through every twist, every heartbreak, every triumph. This story was about more than just romance or revenge. It was about reclaiming your power, choosing mercy, and becoming the person you were always meant to be. If this story touched your heart, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment below telling me your favorite moment, your biggest emotional reaction, or which character you connected with most. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button because we've got so many more emotional, addictive, heart-wrenching stories coming your way. Thank you for being here. Thank you for reading. And remember, you are stronger than you know. Until next time, beautiful souls.